It's National Inclusion Week, and I'm all for a bit of inclusion if it includes everyone. But increasingly, the men and women who have served in our armed forces feel they're left out. There are stereotypes of ex-forces personnel, marching around the workplace, barking orders, or struggling with PTSD. A lot of employees are sceptical that a trooper can change his camo for a suit and blend in. According to research, although 71% of employers said they'd consider employing veterans, only 39% would take on someone with no industry experience. But even if they don't have industry experience, men and women from the forces have other hugely valuable skills. They're professional, they're loyal, organised, and they've cut their teeth under extreme pressure. Don't tell me those wouldn't be skills of use in Civvy Street. Employees need to recognise the potential in the veteran community, give them a chance in a new environment to show what they can do, and then, and only then, can they truly call themselves an inclusive employer. Right, Maggie, before I switch to you, just have a butcher's at what I was doing in town.
My name's Lee McFarlane and I'm the founder and CEO of Y2X.
OK, Y2X?
Y2X is a veteran business. It was founded in 2017.
And why is inclusion such an important part of your business strategy?
Inclusion of veterans into Y2X is really important. These are veterans that have had millions of pounds spent on their training and they're underutilised in the UK.
Now, did you want to say something before I come back on this, on your introduction, or are you good?
No, I'm fine.
You good? All right.
Yeah, I'm fine.
So, sorry, because I thought you might have your say before you get angry. No, joke. There's lots of stereotypes about armed forces and former, but I want to debunk that stereotype with a story, if I may.
OK.
When I was 15 years old, I was surrounded in Southend by a bunch of Combat 18 neo-Nazi thugs who had machetes and hammers, and this total and absolute stranger stepped in and stood between me and these neo-Nazi thugs and asked them to back off. He said, he's only a child, leave him alone. And they rewarded him by forcing me to watch as they stabbed him, punctured his lung and beat him all over his body, and then he fell to the floor and they continued to stamp on him and bash him with clubs. The police arrived, they ran away. I never saw this guy again because the paramedics took him to hospital. And because he was a complete stranger, I never saw him again. 25 years later, last week, I put out a public social media appeal to look for this guy. Now, you may well be aware that Muslim representation in the armed forces and Muslim relationships with the armed forces has been somewhat shaky because of Iraq, Afghanistan. It's been not as good as it should be, right? So I was delighted to find out, after 25 years, when I put this appeal out, loads of media got involved to try and find this guy. He contacted me through my LBC page and asked to see me. Now, I'm calling him Matt because he wants to remain anonymous. I went to see him and I met him about 4 or 5 days ago. And I sat him down, I gave him a hug I'd been waiting to give him for 25 years, and I asked him why he did what he did for me, i.e. stand in front of neo-Nazi thugs and knives who stabbed him. Why did he do that for a total stranger? You know what he said to me, Phil?
No, go on.
He said, well, I was in the army and it was my duty. And he said, it's just what you do. And I looked at him and I said, no, it's not just what you do. No one stands... It was about 6 or 7 of them, by the way, and I was on my own. So he stood in front of 6 or 7 armed thugs.
Unarmed. I
said...
Obviously unarmed.
He was unarmed. I said, no one just does that. He says, well, it's the kind of thing you do, innit? It's just like, you see something wrong and you try and stop it. And I was so proud to learn that this man was a British Army soldier who saved my life. And by the way, that man has gone on, and again, I can't reveal too much at the moment, but he's gone on to find a job in the private sector. He's doing very well for himself 25 years later. And I asked him, I said, do you have a family? He said, I have a wife and I have a child. I said, how old's your daughter? He said, she's about 3 or 4, if I remember correctly. I said, sir, I promise you that your daughter, when she grows up, will know that her father saved my life and he's a hero. So I just want to back up what you said. Often we don't appreciate those who've served in our...
And the humility of the man shows through there as well.
Absolutely.
He doesn't want to be known as a hero. So, you know, we're not necessarily, as veterans, demanding respect or even sort of like begging for it or people's charity. We just want a fair shot in the marketplace, basically.
I mean, no one can top
We
that
want our
story.
skills to cross-pollinate. You know, we want people to take us seriously. And they do in many respects.
Do keep me updated on that. That's the most phenomenal story. Can I just ask you, just change the tack slightly?
Yep.
Do you think the services do enough as personnel leave, whether they leave the Army or the Navy or the RAF?
I do say that their reintegration into society should start the day you join the Army. You should start learning about civilian street the day you join the Army. At present, you don't. You get a rehabilitation package as you get out. It's not great. It's done by a soldier that's probably served 26 years, never been a civvy himself. It's wrong, and I've identified it's wrong. trying to get that up to the head shed is an unbelievable feat. Do you know what I mean? It just don't happen, do you know what I mean? Because they don't listen to you all the time. But if I was to reshuffle something, it would be, the resettlement packages would start the day you join.
All I'm trying to say before the others come in, it's not all the employer's fault, is it?
It's not all the employer's fault.
The military,
the military have to look at their policies of how they discard blokes into Civvy Street. But where I'd like to see the civilian industry pick up on stuff is to recognise that a lot of this, like I said before, and I said, I left school with cycle proficiency, I took that twice, I got nothing else. Until the day I joined the army, I still only had that cycle proficiency because none of my skills cross-decked into Civvy Street. And it was hideous. People just didn't appreciate that. And I think if people could be more, if this word truly is inclusive, they've got to embrace the guys and girls if they get out of the forces, and they've got to look at what they've done, how they've achieved it, where they've done it, and even if they haven't got experience in a certain sector, they've got to be given that chance to prove themselves, because they are trainable. They've shown that. They've been trained. They've been trained at the highest level.
I might sound really naive, but I'm really surprised that it's seen as such a disadvantage. If I were an employer, I would really be interested in somebody who's got that capacity to stick with something, all of the skills you learn, the discipline, the drive. And it's weird because when you're young, if you're a cadet or you do something like that while you're in school, that's seen as a huge boost to your CV. So it's weird. I think that, for me, listening to what you're saying, I think it's probably bigger than individual employers. I think it sounds like there's a whole cultural change that needs to happen where, you were talking earlier about the comparison with America, where it's a completely different relationship with
America are doing it really well. And that's why, I'm trying to work very closely with the Americans to see what they're doing and bring it back over here and fire it up the chain of command.
Because there's a whole atmosphere, and we've talked about other things like homelessness, like, medical care and housing. Like, there's the whole package of ways where we do not treat military personnel fairly. And this feels like just another one of them. And I think it's actually a bigger cultural issue of just not valuing these people.
I'll give you an example of a young lad that I'm not going to say his name either, but he left. He was in one of these driving type regiments. And he had all his driving licences all the way. There wasn't nothing he couldn't drive. Everything you name it, he could drive it. Big, small, whatever, motorbikes, the whole kit and caboodle. When he got out, he only did a couple of years, and he got out when he was under 20. So he got all his licences, but he was under 20. When he went to get a job with a haulage firm, they went, well, you might have all your licences, but you haven't got any experience of doing this, that and the other. And they turned him away. And that was someone who I do know quite closely. And I was just shocked by the fact that, he's achieved so much. He's got all these licences. He's gone out. And because you haven't done it as a civilian, he would,
Phil,
they knocked him back.
What's the impact, as it were, of perceived the issue of post-traumatic stress disorder when you're taking on army personnel? I mean, let's just flash back. We've all watched Bodyguard.
We're in an environment.
Phil, hold on. Can I just ask my question, which is, we all watched Bodyguard, and actually lots of the main characters were ex-army with PTSD, from the hero Bodyguard to one of the shooters who tried to take a pop at the Home Secretary. I don't know if you watched it. So PTSD has been brought into the foreground. It's foregrounding. I can't remember, you must have already watched it.
I haven't.
So, I mean, and the other question I have is, how important is that perception? And two, what is the average age of people leaving the army? I mean, if they're in their 50s, I sort of understand why they don't, find work very quickly. If they're in their 20s, it doesn't make any sense.
It's the ones that are in their 20s that are suffering from the stigma of the ones who've gone before them, I think, in some respects. Now, with the PTSD, it's an extremely, extremely huge problem that we have, OK? However, it's not with every soldier, OK? But the problem that we've had is, to raise the awareness, we've had to paint everybody with the same brush.
Well, from people who are too humble about their achievements to the other end of the spectrum, it's easy to get carried away sometimes when you're boasting about just how much you have achieved, to exaggerate slightly just to make a point. When you're the president of the world's most powerful country, however, and the people you're addressing are your fellow leaders at the United Nations, it might be wise to remember they're more likely than most to rumble you if you take it too far.
In less than 2 years, my administration has accomplished more than almost any administration in the history of our country. America's so true. Didn't expect that reaction, but that's okay.
For that reaction, Mr. Trump, we think you deserve the slapdown of the week. What was he thinking, though, guys?
It's so true.
I mean, he was kind of able to laugh at himself.
Well, I was surprised, actually, that it was almost any. Maybe he's just starting. He's starting to row it back again. He didn't say every.
It's like that time he said his polls are better than Abraham Lincoln's. And it weren't even polls during those days.
Sadly, that's all we've got time for this week. But don't forget, you can join in the debate by searching for The Pledge on Facebook or Twitter. Thank you for watching.